Ancient battlefield, north. Don't touch the stone. Ancient battlefield. You have been warned. Don't touch.
Last year, Larian Studios took the world by storm when they released their massive hit RPG, Baldur's Gate 3. I haven't played it. What I have done is gone back to where it all started and played Larian's very first game. It's this RTS from 1997 called The LED Wars. It's pretty mediocre. I stopped playing after Mission 3 when the FMV briefing stopped playing.
Do I detect a grin on your face, troop?
But Larian isn't famous for their RTSs, so I also played their second game and first RPG, the redundantly titled Divinity, an ARPG with a focus on the RPG. Let's start at the beginning with the opening cutscene. We're shown a trio of dark wizards walking down the hallway of the facepalming statues. Meanwhile, Conan the Barbarian is accosted by some orcs. Back in the dungeon, the trio performs some sort of ritual on a child, turning it into a chained-up woman while Conan tries to escape. One of the wizards tries to kill the woman with a sword, but instead triplicates her before all three of her disappear in beams of light. One of the beams strikes Conan, saving him from the orcs. He's then woken up by a cat, and the cutscene ends. So, a lot of stuff happened, but without much context, and there won't really be a lot of context for it anywhere in the game, but we'll talk more about that later. For now, let's do character creation, or rather character selection, which immediately brings up a question. If we assume Conan from the intro was the player character, who are all these people? Given what we see in the cutscene, and the fact that the player character from this game will appear in later entries as a guy, it's safe to assume that the male warrior is the canon choice here, but that doesn't mean we have to adhere to that limitation. Let's see what this guy's deal is.
I'm a bad boy.
Never mind, warrior it is.
I am strong, as a man should be.
Hell yeah. I kid, but I do actually enjoy these brief voice-acted introductions to the different characters. Lets you know what you're choosing. And lets you pick which voice you want to hear the rest of the game, since many of the players' lines are voice-acted, and the different characters have different voice actors.
Ugh. This sure is a creepy place.
This surely is a creepy place.
Though the choice is mostly cosmetic. The skills and attributes the class choice provides only really matter in the very early game. After that, any character can pick any skill and level whichever stats they like. It's fully possible to pick one of the wizards and play it as a melee-only barbarian, and multi-classing isn't limited at all. The biggest difference is the special ability. Warriors get a whirlwind attack, survivors, basically a rogue, can sneak, and the mages can remotely swap places with an enemy. After picking a character, we wake up in the basement of Joram, a healer in the healer community of Aleroth. He was led to our unconscious form by a cat before bringing us back to the village and nursing us back to health. He mentions that Mardanius, the leader of their community, has gone insane, and none of the other healers has been able to cure him. Their best guess is that it's caused by some kind of demonic possession, so we're sent into the catacombs beneath town to try and find out what's causing his madness and put a stop to it. Man, these face portraits are looking rough. What's odd is there's a stark divide between the scuffed 3D rendered portraits like these ones and the pretty good looking hand-drawn ones like ours. Luckily, most of the portraits are of the hand-drawn variety. After a simple puzzle, the statue in the center of town flies up into the air to open a path below. It took me a bit longer to figure out how to open this locked door in the first room of the dungeon. The way to unlock it is to pull the lever on the wall. This lever, right here, the one that blends right into the wall. This is all over basically all major dungeons in this game. Locked doors that are unlocked by levers right next to them. I have to question the purpose of a locked door that's unlocked by a lever that's right next to it, both from an in-universe point of view and a game design standpoint, but there could be something I'm missing. Before we enter the dungeon, one of the healers gives us a teleporter stone that allows us to instantly travel to its partner stone. He doesn't have the partner and warns us it might be in a dangerous place, but come on, how bad could it be? Maybe at a higher level. As we make our way through the dungeon, we encounter our first enemies, and combat is pretty simple. We click the enemy, and our guy hits them until one of us is dead. The controls are actually almost entirely on the mouse. Click to move, attack, select ability or use a potion in the menu, and right click to use an ability. Though at the start, we don't have many abilities, especially as the warrior, so the combat in here kinda just devolves into slap fights where the victory is decided by raw stats and luck with hits. And of course how many healing potions we have to spam. However, later you can unlock a wide variety of abilities that change combat up a lot. Though for the pure warrior, clicking single targets and going Beyblade on groups remains the core of combat for the entire duration of the game. This presents an issue for the humble warrior. A lot of the times you run into a tough enemy, you don't have a lot of tactical options to deal with it other than chugging potions and hoping for the best. So while you can pretty easily carve a path of destruction through the skeleton warriors and archers that populate the dungeon, more elite enemies can be a problem. Now there are actually some pretty powerful weapons you can find in here that you'd think would be a perfect solution to this problem for a warrior. There's a quest from an orc in the dungeon who wants us to get him a special axe, and there are a bunch of axes in here as potential candidates, most of whom are really strong compared to the crap we're currently using. Too strong, even. This game has the standard RPG stats: strength, agility, intellect, and constitution. I'm sure most of you can guess what these do, so I won't get too into it, but they also relate to weapons since they have stat requirements for equipping them, and for high-level weapons, these can get pretty steep. As a warrior, we start out with 10 points in all stats but strength, where we have 15. Every level we gain 5 more points we can assign however we like. So what do you imagine the stat requirements are for the axes we find in here, in the first dungeon, in the first town? Literally the lowest level area in the game. How about 60 strength and 30 agility? Putting every available stat point into strength and agility, that's 13 times we need to level up before we can equip these. For reference, I finished the catacombs at level 8, having killed damn near all enemies and done all side quests in town. I wouldn't mind this so much if there were also some good level appropriate melee weapons in here, and you get like 4 of them, so they also kind of break the economy early on since they sell for thousands of gold each. The dungeon is also absolutely enormous, consisting of 5 large, sprawling levels filled to the brim with skeletons. Its design is very repetitive, using the same limited tileset for almost the entire dungeon. I was pretty sick of it towards the end, though sadly this issue is present through most of the dungeons in this game. They're just not very visually interesting. Initially, I thought this would turn out to be the Facepalm Temple from the intro and tie into the main story that way, but it's actually completely unrelated to the main plot. The story of the catacombs is all about a nobleman who turned to necromancy in a bid to become immortal. He's the one possessing Mardanius and causing his insanity, so he's gotta go. Before we confront him though, we can open a side passage to find the room with the second teleporter stone, and it's a godsend. If you interact with one of the stones, it'll teleport you to the other. So I plopped one down in one of the unoccupied houses in Aleroth and made it my home base, with item storage and a bed only a button press away at any given moment. The vendors in town can also identify items on the cheap, though I don't really like having to identify items in games. I just don't see how a trip to town before I can use menu drop improves the game at all. At the bottom of the catacombs, we find the necromancer's skeletal minions trying to resurrect him. Well, there's your problem. Let me get that for you. So now he's achieved immortality, but one where he's in constant pain, so he begs us to kill him, and we do. After fighting our way through a horde of his vengeful minions that were not there before the cutscene, we're rescued by a restored Mardanius, and that's the end of that little adventure. The breadcrumb quest to leave town can be found in the home of the town's merchant, George, who has been murdered. The healers don't know who did it, but there was a shady drug dealer in his store earlier, so he's the prime suspect, and Mardanius tasks us with tracking him down. But we can't take 2 steps outside of town before a cutscene starts where some soldiers are turned to mincemeat by a group of orcs. Their leader makes it to town though, and he explains that he was sent here because a plague is tearing through the lands and the healers are needed to help with the cure. Mardanius won't send anyone unless there's an escort protecting them from the orcs, so we're sent to deliver a request for an escort to the general in charge of the army. On the way, we have to fight our way through the orcs blocking the road and patrolling the woods, but we also run into the actual beginning of the main quest. Guarding a bridge we need to cross is a dragon rider. He's been waiting just for us, calling us a marked one before attacking us with his magic. We're only saved when the wizard Zandalor arrives and kills the Dragon Rider. He heals us and gives us the scoop. The Dragon Rider belonged to a group called the Black Ring, and was sent to kill us for being a marked one. He explains we're one of 3 marked ones, but doesn't really explain what that means. It's actually not explained very well anywhere in the game, but apparently the triplicating woman in the intro was an angel sent by the gods to mark people as candidates for becoming the Divine One. Basically the setting's messiah who would unite all the races against the Lord of Chaos, the setting's Satan figure. The Black Ring had her captured, but she managed to split into 3 and create 3 marked ones, us included. He doesn't have time to explain further since he has to go find another marked one, so he tells us to meet up with him and the other marked ones at a nearby inn. But before he leaves, he gives us a pair of scrolls that will let us use the regional teleportation network, or at least part of it. Every race has their own scroll letting them use their own portals, and Zandalor only has the wizard scroll to give us, but still, it's very nice. These teleporters are sprinkled throughout the land near points of interest, and together with a pair of teleporter stones make fast travel pretty easy. I much prefer systems like this to the modern idea of fast travel, where you just press a map marker and instantly appear at the destination. This makes you use at least some of your brain, and as I mentioned before, he only gives you the scroll to unlock part of the system. There are 7 scrolls in total, and I know I made it a priority to go looking for them whenever I could, making them a nice reward for quests and exploration, other than just gear and XP. Though in practice there are only 4 scrolls that really matter, since the Orc, Imp and Lizard scrolls only unlock 1 teleporter each, and all of them are in remote areas you never really have to revisit. You can actually get the Lizard scroll right away if you go back to Aleroth and talk to the Lizard healer Gomo, who will give it to you if you've done a side quest. Zandalor then leaves, and this is where the main story and kinda the real game actually begins. The catacombs and the quest from the army guy are both completely optional, though skipping the catacombs would leave you very underleveled for the enemies out here. I actually kinda got the wrong idea of what this game would be from the catacombs dungeon. Having the first part of the game be this massive sprawling dungeon crawl made me think this game would be primarily about clearing large dungeons, when it really isn't. After you cross the bridge, the world opens up and you can freely explore around however you like, tackle quests in whatever order you like, or get sidetracked with the many optional side quests found throughout the land. I want to be clear, this is a good thing. I enjoyed exploring the overworld a hell of a lot more than slogging my way through what was a pretty repetitive dungeon. And the outside looks a hell of a lot nicer than the dungeons. Other than those, I thought the sprite-based graphics looked pretty good. Now while you can go wherever you like at this point, that might not be a good idea. This isn't a Bethesda game, there's no level scaling. If you go to a high level area early on, the enemies there will turn you to paste with ease. Though there are a few oddities with the placement of more difficult enemies in these low level areas, and the best example of that is the Orc War Drummer. They have a spammable AoE heal that fills the health bar of any orc around them to full, including themselves. They also have really annoying AI that follows you around at a distance and tries to run away when you attack them. But even if you manage to corner one, good luck killing it. God, look at all this missing. What is this, Morrowind? Realizing I couldn't kill the bastard even with the help of these guards, I just left him there to endlessly fight them, who for some reason couldn't seem to die. Leaving the area didn't stop their eternal struggle either. They were still going at it when I returned several in-game days later. Don't worry though, I came back a few weeks later after leveling a bit to free them from this endless torment. The game does a pretty good job encouraging exploration, with the solution to a lot of quests and a couple of entire quest lines being found just by wandering around, checking various nooks and crannies, and talking to absolutely everyone. If you're the type of person that doesn't read quests and just likes to follow a map marker, you might have a bad time here. Though I found the quests led into each other pretty well, so you could just follow the common thread from the basement in Aleroth all the way to the end of the game, and always know where you need to go and what you need to do to progress the story. When we make our way to the inn, we find another marked one, but no Zandalor. He had gone to the Duke's castle to retrieve the third marked one, but hasn't returned, so our character decides that we should meet him there. But when we arrive, we're turned away at the door. The bouncer won't let any old loser off the street into the Duke's castle, but Ralph, the commander of the guard, has 3 jobs for us that could potentially earn us an invitation. We can try to cure the disease ravaging the poor quarter of the local village, we can investigate the suspicious death of the old Duke, or we can help fight in the war against the orcs. Each of these on its own is enough to earn an invitation, but we can start with the simplest, fighting the orcs. We can begin by delivering the request from the healers to the general, who gives us another assignment to deliver orders to a Captain Mytox on the front lines. She also lets us take anything we need from the armory since we're working for the army, so...
I'll have to drop something, I'm carrying too much. I'll have to drop something, I'm carrying too much. I'll have to drop something, I'm carrying too... I may be strong, but I'm not that strong. I'll have to drop something, I'm carrying too much.
I needed it. Captain Mytox can be found in a half-burnt down village to the south, surrounded by orcs. After we deliver the letter to him, he gives us a new job to destroy the orc supply wagon, breaking the siege. He gives us a bomb as well as the activation scroll for the human teleporters, which is probably the most useful one. He also says we can take whatever gear and supplies we need from the tent camp, so I go there intending to take everything I need, when suddenly...
Ha! Marked one. You have annoyed us already for too long. Let's see if you can get out of this. Ready? Let our enemy taste the real power of mind control.
Go ahead.
Chicks, fix, and ready.
Oh, my head! My head! Kill the civilian! Kill! Kill! Oh, yes. Yes, master. Yes, master.
Holy shit, way to remind us of the main plot and showcase the power of the antagonists. I initially just ran away without killing anyone, but later changed my mind. Sorry boys, Chosen One needs his XP. I was actually pretty concerned about the level of the enemies guarding the orc supplies, since some of the orcs around Mytox's camp were elite orcs, who were a significant step up in difficulty from the regular orc warriors, despite looking completely indistinguishable from them. But that concern was unfounded. It turns out that they for some reason put the hardest enemies on the path to the army camp and had the quest target be guarded by the slightly tougher but still pretty easy to kill heavy orcs. There was a giant heavy orc guarding the supplies who acted as a nice boss fight, which I beat by utilizing hit and run tactics, the shield spell, and having my guy chug his entire body weight in potions. The supplies are also found in the burnt out remains of what used to be a village, which combined with the orcs raiding all over the place behind the lines does a good job of showing the humans losing the war. Next, Mytox wants us to poison the well in the orcs' main camp. Unsurprisingly, it's heavily guarded by an army of orcs, but not a lot of the more elite giant orcs. I always found groups of lesser enemies to be easier to deal with than the bosses, so poisoning the well went by without much issue. And after being sent back to the general by Mytox, we're told our deeds have impressed the Duke enough to earn us an invitation to the castle. This path is definitely the most combat-focused one, requiring little dialogue or exploration, with all the objectives marked on the map as soon as we get the quest. Curing the disease, on the other hand, is almost entirely dialogue and exploration. Commander Ralph recommends we check with Dr. Aleroth, the main guy trying to cure the disease, but that won't lead anywhere. The real start is this seemingly unrelated side quest given by a farmer to investigate why all his crops are dying. This is one of those quests that require a lot of random exploration, since we're not given any hint at all as for where to find it, or where to start looking to continue it. But near the farms is a cave where we can find barrels of poison guarded by an orc who's clearly acting on someone else's behalf. He drops a key, and again, we have no hint on what to do next. But in the basement of a local inn, we find a room filled with more poison barrels. It's a good thing we see the world from an isometric perspective, or this would have been a lot harder to find. The innkeeper reveals he rented that room to Dr. Aleroth, so we go and confront him. He can be found in his house in the merchant quarter, and I should point out that while these places are called quarters as if they're separate districts in the same town, they are completely separate towns halfway across the map from each other. Anyway, we talk to Dr. Aleroth in his house, who claims the key to his poison room was stolen before barging out indignantly. We don't buy his story though, so we have to break into his house, which would be hard without the lockpicking skill. except he has a key hidden under a rock outside, which can easily be found by holding Alt, which highlights lootable items out in the world, even when they're hidden behind other stuff. It's actually really useful. Once inside, we navigate a puzzle to open the doors and check out his basement, where we're massacred by his Jinn security guard. Some of its attacks barely scratch us, while others pulverize us in a single hit. I figured I was a bit low level for this guy, so I went and did some side quests and grinded enemies until I thought I had studied the blade enough to face the Jinn and win. Alright, new plan. Let's cut him around with a bow and arrow. First try, easy, didn't even take a hit. This does bring up some questions on how powerful ranged builds must be compared to melee. I built this character solely as a melee warrior, investing all my stat points and skills into improving melee damage or survivability, and yet using a bow and arrow was still a more reliable way to kill most bosses. And no, this wasn't the only one. We'll come back to this point later, but for now we'll continue with the quest. In the room the Jinn was guarding is a note detailing how the disease is actually entirely made up. The Black Ring gave Aleroth the poison to use against the Ducal army, but he instead decided to use it to poison the well in the Poor Quarter, making up the story about the plague and faked being a doctor to throw investigators off his trail. What? He poisoned their well? What kind of monster would do something like that? Aleroth confronts us on the way out and warns us that he has powerful friends at court before making us leave. Before leaving the merchant district, I took the opportunity presented by all the rich merchants around to dump all the crap gear I had hoarded up to this point, earning me tens of thousands of gold and a near infinite supply of healing potions. If the axis in the catacombs kinda broke the economy, this basically snapped the economy's spine in half. After easily dispatching the kinda pathetic assassins sent to kill us, we can show the note to Commander Ralph, who gives us an invitation to the castle so we can report all this to the Duke. Lastly, we can investigate the suspicious death of the old Duke, which takes us to Verdistis, the largest town in the game and the first overworld location locked behind a loading screen so far. There are surprisingly few of these, with only Verdistis and the later Dark Forest area requiring a loading screen to enter. Technically the final zone could count too, but we'll cover that when we get there. The commander told us to begin our investigation with Sir Dante, a merchant with connections to the Assassin's Guild. After doing some casual breaking and entering on his behalf, he arranges a meeting with the assassins, which quickly turns violent when we ask about the Duke's murder. Luckily, these assassins suck, so we can carve a bloody swath through their headquarters until we corner their leader, who promises to set up a meeting with the Duke's killer in exchange for his life. We report this to Ralph, who joins us at the meeting place and tries to arrest the killer after we get him to confess, but end up having to kill him instead.
You'll never take me alive, copper!
The voice acting in this game sure is something. As thanks for solving the murder, we're given an invitation to the castle. Even though we didn't really solve the murder, this guy was just a killer for hire, and we never learned who hired him. Still, we got the invitation, so now we can go look for Zandalore at the castle. The first thing that happens once we enter the castle is this little pink imp guy poofs into existence and asks if he can have a look at our teleporter stone. We let him have it, and he vanishes into thin air. We're given no chance to react before being directed to the throne room. There we meet the Duke, Janus. He's 12 years old, talks weird, has a clearly villainous advisor, and claims he's the Divine One, chosen by the gods to unite all 7 races and solve the world's problems. He's so impressed by our feats, he's decided to make us his Lord Protector, basically his bodyguard, and it's an offer we can't refuse. Our new job means we're not allowed to leave his side, and since some asshole stole our Hearthstone, we're stuck. We can explore the castle, minus the basement where the guards won't let us in. Most of the characters we talk to mention how Janus had a sudden and dramatic personality change recently, and almost none of them actually believe he's the Divine One, with Bronthian, the Elven advisor, making a good point that the Divine One is supposed to work for the good of all 7 races, while Janus is leading a war against the Orcs, one of those same 7 races. For a royal, or I guess ducal castle, there also aren't a lot of valuables to steal, with the exception of a unique shield in the armory, called the Shield of the Dragon, which is part of the game's bestest and most special set of armor, but we'll cover that more later. Sadly, there's no way to move forward without complying with Janus' bullshit, so we have to go along with his whims. His first task is to find his cat. When we do, the cat introduces himself as Arhu and tells us Zandalor sent him to speak with us. He's worried because Zandalor disappeared into the castle cellars to look for the third marked one and wants us to investigate. But since the guards won't let us down there, we have to keep doing chores for Janus. Deliver a love letter to his girlfriend, deliver flowers to his girlfriend, find his girlfriend's lost teddy bear, all the while he threatens us and generally acts like a dick. While reporting back to Janus, we overhear Bronthian telling him that the dwarves have defiled the elves' burial grounds and stolen some of their artifacts. He wants the humans to remain neutral when the elves go to war over this. Janus refuses though, saying if the dwarves invoke Fantasy Article 5, the humans will go to war on their side, causing Bronthian to storm off. The next scene in the throne room is a visit from representatives of the church and local merchants, who are all in on this whole Divine One story, and Janus makes some pretty wild promises in his speech.
Before the first snow of winter, the orc warbands will have been driven and scattered like chaff. By spring, I will have eradicated all poverty, and by my sacred sword, all shall live in peace and plenty.
You can insert your own topical political joke here, it kinda writes itself. The meeting is interrupted when Sauron's Seamtil 6 enter the building to try and kill Janus. We make short work of them, but apparently not short enough for these people, so they kick us out of the clubhouse. As we go to leave, we're intercepted by the obviously evil advisor, who kidnaps us to her dungeon and reveals her hideous true form before leaving. So, question. What was the point of any of that? Why bait us to come to the castle, stop us from leaving, then force us to leave and kidnap us outside of the castle, instead of skipping straight to the last step and just abducting us right away? All that did was introduce us to Arhu, who comes in with the save, taking out the guards and giving us the key to the cell. After retrieving our stuff, we can either head straight to the exit, or explore the dangerous lower levels. They are one of the few dungeons in this game that rival the Aleroth catacombs when it comes to size, but the enemies here are far more deadly, with these life-leeching liches, upgraded versions of the skeletons from the catacombs, and these annoying zombies that pop out of the ground with this really lengthy and high damage poison dot. At the end is the most dangerous enemy we've encountered so far, a monstrous beast called Syrian. It hits harder and faster than a mutated Mike Tyson. I only managed to outlast it by chugging almost my entire supply of healing potions. I swear, my guy was more potion than man by the time that abomination went down. The reward for completing the dungeon is a piece of chest armor that, while good, isn't that good, and certainly not good enough to justify what we had to go through to get it. If you do want an item that I would call that good, you can find that on the top floor, where we started. In this hidden room, that isn't really hidden since the perspective is isometric, is a strange sword that can't be used right away, with a description saying 3 items must be gathered so that 2 can be sacrificed to empower the third. This is part of a questline we'll do after leaving the dungeon. When we're finished down there, we emerge in a graveyard where we're met by Arhu the cat, who says we need to rescue Zandalor from the castle since he's probably being held prisoner there. He suggests we could enter from the sewers or check with the Thieves Guild to see if they know a way into the castle, and coincidentally, that's also where we can find the second of the trio of items we're looking for. That quest actually starts if you read a book in the Cursed Abbey, a mini dungeon with some side quests attached to it. The Abbey is also the location that makes the best use of music in the whole game. When you enter, it goes quiet, with only a heartbeat audible to build tension. Then as you start fighting the undead inhabitants, it goes into this really intense drum beat. Overall, the soundtrack is pretty good, though sometimes the tracks feel a bit out of place. Like this future cutscene, where we see our allies run for their lives to the sound of this whimsical tune.
We're in trouble, Marked One. A strong enchantment lies over this place and blocks my magic. It's pointless to try to cast spells in here.
As I said, out of place. The book in the Abbey contains information about the trio of weapons. Well, the book calls them weapons, even though one's an amulet, but whatever. The book says the sword can be found in the castle, the dagger is owned by the merchants in Verdistis, and the amulet is buried in an elven tomb. Now, given that we found the sword in a completely different spot than the book said it was in, it's no surprise that the dagger is not in the Merchants Guild in Verdistis. Instead, it can be found in the headquarters of the Thieves Guild, which you can access after joining that guild, which is a process so quick and easy, It puts Skyrim's Thief's Guild to shame. You pickpocket the necklace off one drunk and pick the lock on one door. And that's it. That's all it takes to join. This gives you access to their base, where you can find the dagger hidden inside a book. The Guildmaster also marks some known entrances to the castle on your map, but these are also in the sewers, so we'll still have to go through there. Before that though, we can engage in some innocent grave robbing. In the very north of the Dark Forest are some elven ruins with an entrance to an old tomb where the amulet can be found. On the way there, we can also quickly dip into the Archer's Guild and get the elven teleporter scroll from this bearded elf guy. The book from the Abbey said to bring the 3 items to a crypt north of the old church. Once inside, we can choose which of the 3 items to keep, so I, of course, picked the sword. Much like all other gear in this game, the stats themselves on the sword are randomized, so your mileage may vary, but I hit the jackpot with mine. The stat increases are kind of meh, but look at this. 3 points frost and 5 points stun. These are passive skills the sword unlocks when you have it equipped. Stun gives your melee hits a chance to briefly stun the stricken enemy, and frost has a chance of freezing them, which is basically another stun. With the added attack speed from the sword skill, I could pretty reliably stunlock a shocking amount of enemies by simply attacking them. The difficulty curve of this game genuinely took a complete nosedive after finding this thing. There's only one problem with it. Some enemies that die while stunned will enter a strange state of limbo instead of dying normally. They'll freeze in place and give XP as if they died, but won't drop any loot and will still show up as a red dot on the map. Given that this sword had a high chance of stunning anything it hit, this happened disconcertingly often, and I was constantly worried it was going to break a quest and softlock the game. But it only ever broke one side quest when this boss refused to die and didn't drop his quest item. Luckily I could fix it by just reloading an earlier save and killing him again. Back in the main quest, we make our way through the bizarrely huge sewer system. Seriously, it stretches beneath most of the first map, and Verdist is like a damn Skaven undercity, with access points in the Merchant Quarter, Poor Quarter, and the castle, which we can use to enter the castle.
The trap worked, Master.
Excellent! Quickly, lock the door! Zandalor and the Marked Ones are trapped inside. Victory is ours!
Looks like they were expecting us. Well, at least now we can find Zandalor and the other Marked One, and...
I'm no coward, Zandalor, and I don't run from the fool. Come on, you bastards, fight!
No! Don't be a fool!
A fool maybe, but I'm no coward. Come on, let's see the color of your blood, you swine!
Your decrepit friend is right, Marked One. We will be the death of you.
No!
R.I.P. Scottish Marked One. If only Zandalor had a special potion he could have used to teleport you out of here. Luckily, the orcs that killed him weren't particularly strong. Hell, even the Death Knight went down pretty easily. Zandalor thanks us for the save, but doesn't want to leave yet. He went down here to check if an artifact called the Sword of Lies is still here. He explains the sword was forged by a dark wizard in ages past, and imbued with part of the Lord of Chaos's essence. Wielding the blade, the wizard led a demonic invasion of the land before being banished by the combined might of the 7 races. The Sword of Lies also had an interesting role in the development of the game. I'm sure most people will agree that Divine Divinity is a pretty stupid title. One person that agrees is Sven Vinke, CEO of Larian Studios. According to him, the original working title was Divinity, the Sword of Lies, before the publisher decided the name needed an alliteration after another one of their games, Sudden Strike, was a big hit. The publisher also screwed them over in other ways, like releasing the game in a buggy state before it was ready, and writing the contract to ensure Larian didn't see much money from the game, despite good sales and reviews. Anyway, Zandalor tells us to check if the Sword of Lies is still there, and tells us the password to the Attack on Titan looking vault door? Okay. Well, the Sword of Lies is nowhere to be found. What we do find is a toy dragon. Zandalor figures Janus got into the treasure room, somehow, and was possessed by the evil within the sword. With the fate of the sword revealed, Zandalor uses a special potion to teleport us out of there. We appear at the inn where we met the other Marked One, but before we can meet up with him, a cutscene plays where a kid lures him outside to a dragon rider who kills him. This makes us the last living Marked One, meaning we will have to undergo the ritual to become the Divine One. To do this, Zandalor teleports us to the meeting hall of the League of Seven, which he explains was the place where representatives from the 7 races would meet up. Orcs, imps, elves, lizards, dwarves, humans, and wizards. Our guy tries to be a smartass about why only those races are included and how wizards count as a race, but the explanation does sound reasonable. They were the 7 most powerful groups in the land, and wizards were counted as a race basically to shorten the name of the group. He brought us here to resurrect the council needed for the ritual to become the Divine One, but he's interrupted by a demonic succubus imprisoning him with a spell. After defeating the succubus and her random mummy minions, Zandalor is freed and explains we can find new members of the council by pondering that race's orb, which gives us a vision showing who it is and where they are. We can also find that imp that stole our fancy pyramids in a side room, and he gives them back willingly. Yeah, thanks a lot, asshole. The human council members are all Palmardanians.
That's Martineus.
Whatever. He can be recruited after the orcs and the warlock the Black Ring sent to stop us have been defeated. The lizard counselor is Gomo, one of the healers from Aleroth. He's been kidnapped by the Black Ring and turned into a snake. We rescue him and turn him back to normal after Zandalor rescues us when we're captured trying to rescue him. The orc representative is a dissident called Croxy, who was imprisoned deep in their camp after voicing his opposition to the orcs working for the Black Ring. Man, the Black Ring just loves imprisoning people. They could have won like 5 times over by now if they just killed people when they had the chance. To free him, we just need to go berserk on the whole army in the orc camp. Once they're all dead, we can recruit Croxy. We can also find the orc teleporter scroll and the soul teleporter it activates here in the camp. But what's the point? There's no reason ever to come back here after this. The representative of the imps can be found at the inn in Verdistus. He's hiding in a pocket dimension in a magic sphere, so we enter it and pick a side in the ongoing race war between the local populations of bees and wasps in order to reach the imp and recruit him. His name's Antix, and he used to be part of the Black Ring. We even met him briefly when he helped mind control that soldier camp to attack us. He's had a change of heart though, so he agrees to join the council. The dwarf, an ambassador named Aeolus, can be found in the village of Glenboris, where we hear grave news.
Hear ye, hear ye! To all brave and loyal dwarves, our good king calls you to arms! War is declared on the dastardly elves! Step forward to defend your homeland!
He explains that their most sacred artifact, the Axe of Stone, has been stolen, and an elf was found at the scene of the crime. When interrogated, the elf tells us he was knocked down and left on the scene to frame the elves, but the dwarves aren't buying it. The quest log says our investigation should start in the Dwarven Halls, their capital, so we head over there and talk to their king. He refuses to believe the elves could be innocent, but we also hear some rumors around town about missing miners, so we head down to the mines to investigate. Down there, we're attacked by evil dwarves. We know they're evil because that's what their name says. At the bottom of the mines is a warlock of the Black Ring guiding their efforts. He worked with the king's brother to steal the Axe of Stone, and framed the elves to start a war in order to empower the demon within the Sword of Lies. We force him to flee and retrieve the axe. Besides the axe, there's also a very important, very missable, and somehow optional item to find down here. On this seemingly random table that is just covered in unimportant books and notes is a letter that incriminates the king's brother in the plot. When we return the axe to the king, he stands his troops down, and without the letter, that's where the quest ends. We just return to Glenboris and recruit the dwarf to the council. If you do have the letter, his reward is giving us the Dwarven Teleporter Scroll and telling us about the fabled dragon armor, forged to combat the Lord of Chaos during his last invasion. He has the dragon helmet, and will give it to us if we can find the breastplate, and empower it using an artifact known as the Heart of the Dragon. The breastplate is owned by a wealthy merchant in Verdistus, who will give it to us if we help him shake some guy down for money. It's just 2,000 gold, that's nothing in this game. The axes from the catacombs sold for 3 times that. The Heart of the Dragon is a bit more involved. We need to find the Warriors Guild deep in the Dark Forest, do their first quest to retrieve an artifact from their haunted basement, and then get the second quest to retrieve the Heart of the Dragon from a sect of dragon worshippers hiding out in the Imp Castle. The heart is held by the Dragon Rider leading the sect. This is the quest that got bugged out by the Super Sword on my first try. The castle also holds the Imp Teleport Scroll and the Soul Imp Teleporter, which, much like the Orc one, doesn't matter much because there's no reason ever to come back here after this. Though I guess it's nice to have the complete set. Bring the chest piece and the heart to the blacksmith in the Dwarf Halls, and he'll combine them to create the mighty Breastplate of the Dragon Heart. As promised, the king gives us the dragon helmet, but that's not the full set. The shield we already have from the castle. The belt can be found in the basement of this random house in Verdistis, and the gloves can be found in one of the pyres at the Elven burial grounds. I'm sure the elves won't mind the grave robbing, it's not like they're about to start a war over it or anything. Bring all the pieces together, and you've got a pretty sweet set of armor. Potentially. I've mentioned it before, but all weapons and armor have random stats, so it might actually suck. You never know. But if that's too simple and straightforward for you, there is another legendary chest piece you can find. Deep in the dark forest lives a hermit who will give you a quest to slay a legendary beast known as the Stalker, who turns out to have disguised himself as the hermit to lead us to our doom. After the beast is slain, we can find a chest piece in his cave with a description saying that at the moment it's just ornamental plate, but could become something special with the right enchantment. Next, you need to do another quest where you find 4 pieces of a treasure map that are scattered all over the world, leading you to a cave hidden in the dark forest. You will need to bring with you a teleporter stone, at least 2002 pieces of gold, and 5 bottles of dwarven ale from Rimmer. Yes, that's his name, get your minds out of the gutter. Make your way through the cave until you reach the 9/11 memorial plaque. Make sure to pick up the 4 pieces of rope on the ground. Drop your excess gold until you have exactly 2002 pieces on you, and make sure there's 1 teleporter stone on the ground somewhere, and 1 in your inventory. You can now use the portal stone to reach the Easter egg area. There you can find a dungeon with the game's writing, sound, graphics, and programming departments. In the programming department, you can find Sven, who will upgrade the silver breastplate to the special Larian armor after you defeat the bugs troubling the programmers. At this point, you can use the teleporter stone in your inventory to leave, since the regular portal stone doesn't actually work. This is clearly an Easter egg area rather than an actual questline, which is good because figuring this stuff out on your own seems basically impossible. Back in the story, only the elf remains to be recruited, so we make our way to the elven village in the Dark Forest and speak to Bronthian. But he won't join the council with the war against the dwarfs still looming on the horizon. Yeah, we may have stopped the dwarfs from attacking the elves, but the elves are still gonna start a war to avenge the desecration of their burial grounds. We offer to drive the dwarfs from the burial grounds and retrieve the stolen relics, which he says will be enough to stop the war and let him join the council. There's also an unusual side quest here where our guy talks to an elf woman and falls head over heels in love with her. She does show some interest, but wants us to solve the conflict between the elves and dwarves before committing to a relationship with a human. Well, joke's on her, we were gonna do that anyway. At the burial grounds, we find a large camp of orcs, led by a Black Ring warlock, who were the ones really behind the desecration. We bring back the stolen relics to Bronthian, making him both call off the war and join the council. We can also talk to our elven sweetheart now that we prevented the war, but she moves the goalposts and says it's elven tradition we bring her a precious gift to prove ourselves worthy. Worse yet, she'll only accept her mother's necklace that was lost in ages past as a valid gift. She provides no clues on where to look, just a drawing of it, but we can work with that. There's a master jeweler in the Dwarf Halls that says he can recreate anything from a blueprint, so we give him the drawing and return later for a flawless replica. It's good enough to fool our new girlfriend, earning us the greatest reward of all, love. And all it took was some mild deception. Anyway, we can now return to the meeting hall and ring the gong to start the ritual that will ascend us to divinity. This involves us being sent to the lands of the dead, or in layman's terms, killed. The next step is for the council to summon us back, but before they can do that, they're interrupted by Janus.
Janus, but this is holy ground. You cannot enter this place.
A demon? Here? Unthinkable! Janus summons a group of death knights and warlocks before revealing his true demonic form. Zandalor can only watch as the rest of the council is slain, but before he's finished off, it cuts to a rare pre-rendered cutscene where we receive the blessings of the gods before ascending to divinity and being reborn. We reappear in a wasteland near a pair of friendly comic relief orcs who give us a map to a nearby village. Becoming the Divine One gave us a massive chunk of XP, earning us several levels up instantly, as well as unlocking the new Divine One skills. The descriptions made these sound really good, like slowing everything on screen or instantly killing a single weak opponent, but the ones I tried didn't work as well in practice. For instance, the ability to instantly kill a weak enemy is pretty useless when all the enemies that aren't immune to it can be killed pretty effortlessly at this point anyway. The lands are full of aggressive imps shooting blow darts at us, including a type of spider rider with 2 health bars, one for the spider and one for the rider. On the way to the village, we run into our pal Zandalor, who explains he was rescued at the last second by Arhu the cat, the real hero of this story. He goes on to say that this is what remains of the orcs' homeland. After the ritual, the Black Ring's power grew, so they betrayed the orcs, summoning armies of demons to terrorize their homelands. Yeah, a lot's happened since the ritual. With no council to summon us back, we were gone for months before we could return on our own. The Black Ring and the demon are now carrying out a foul ritual to summon the Lord of Chaos, which Zandalor's been unable to stop because a cursed lake prevents any living thing from passing over to the ritual dungeon. He believes we can use our new Divine One powers to become a ghost, allowing us to cross the lake, but that we need to be taught this power by a truly ancient being. Luckily there's one nearby, a dragon. So we need to convince the dragon to teach us the spell. Zandalor's nice enough to teleport us to the village we were headed to, which has only one inhabitant, Croxy the Orc. He survived the magical attack, played dead, and hitched a ride with Zandalor and Arhu to escape the meeting hall massacre. He's the only vendor in the area, and with this, we have seen basically all there is to see in the zone. Yeah, it's a bit less content dense than the other areas. All that's left to do is go to the dragon, convince it to teach us the spell to become a ghost, use it across the lake, and enter the final dungeon. This is why I said earlier that this only kind of counts as a real zone. There's just not a lot to do here compared to the other areas. As soon as we enter the dungeon, the demon senses our presence and commands the Black Ring to delay us as he finishes summoning the Lord of Chaos. The path to the demon is blocked by spikes, and the members of the Black Ring must die in order to remove them. Most of the dungeon is guarded by pretty weak gargoyles, though each of the warlocks has their own fortress with a special garrison. Like, one is full of death knights and another is full of burning fire zombies. The first warlock I found also had a really annoying moveset where she would open by casting the blind spell on me, meaning I couldn't attack her, then spamming out really fast and high damage floor spikes while I was unable to fight back. The blind would eventually wear off, but she would just reapply it instantly when that happened. My strategy was to fight cheese with cheese, rush her with the stun sword, and hope I could stunlock her before she could stunlock me. This strategy worked on her and all the other warlocks, opening the way to the demon, but too late. The Lord of Chaos has been summoned into the body of a child. The world is doomed. All that remains is for us to enter the demon's fortress and avenge the world by killing it. When all else fails, there is always revenge. The demon's main move is summoning ads and creating fire under my feet, so I beat him by chugging potions and spinning around like a Beyblade. In the cutscene that follows, the demon is banished back to hell, and after a moment of temptation, we banish the Sword of Lies along with him. We draw blade, ready to end the baby possessed by the Lord of Chaos, but hesitate at the last moment. It then cuts to Zandalor and Arhu, observing us, leaving with the baby? Who knows? Maybe if I do a video on the sequels, we'll find out. I would go to the conclusion here, but there's actually a bit more to talk about. Back when I fought the Djinn, and all the other times I had to resort to archery, I wondered how strong a real ranged build would be, so I actually went back and played the game again on another character focused on archery to see if I was right. I naturally picked the roguish survivor.
I'm a bad boy.
Female survivor.
I steal from the rich and give it all to my poor self.
Based. The bows you can get at the very start don't do a lot of damage, but even then I was dying a lot less than the warrior, simply because I barely ever got hit thanks to kiting. And before I was done with the Aleroth catacombs, I bought a high damage longbow from George's store for a shockingly low price that had much lower stat requirements than the melee weapons I had at that point on the warrior. That bow pretty effortlessly ripped everything in the catacombs and the rest of the early game to absolute pieces. So the answer is yes, ranged builds slap. But that was only the first of 3 powerful tactics I would discover on this other character. In an effort to keep enemies at a distance, I unlocked the freeze spell. It's a stun that lasts for a few seconds, has no cooldown, a low mana cost, and no diminishing returns. Any enemy that wasn't immune to this became trivially easy to stunlock. This included many bosses, such as the Djinn, every single orc, and the Black Ring warlocks. But even this pales in comparison to the third tactic. While doing a side quest to clear out a troll cave, I encountered the Troll King, a boss immune to freezing with a slow spell that made kiting impossible. To beat him, I made use of the deadly gift ability to lay some traps. There are 3 types of trap, 2 types of explosives that I almost never used, and the extremely overpowered Scorpion Trap. Contrary to its name, the Scorpion Trap isn't actually a trap. It actually summons a steel scorpion that's hostile to all enemies and neutral to you. I summoned a few of these before engaging the Troll King, and they wiped out him and his guards in seconds. I refrained from using this for regular encounters, since Scorpion Traps are a consumable item that you need to bring with you in your inventory. But I got a true demonstration of their insane power level when fighting a vampire in Verdistus. This is the boss at the end of the George's Murderer quests. Yeah, remember George? The guy whose murder we left Aleroth to solve? Well, this guy's the culprit. He's pretty strong, able to drain most of my health bar in a single hit. He's also immune to the freeze and too fast to kite, so I deployed a small force of 5 scorpions to distract him. Here's how that went. They didn't even take a scratch. This isn't even their final form. Putting more points in the skill ups their level from 100, okay, that might be one too many zeros, up to level 500. And even better, the Aura of Command ability lets you make summoned creatures follow you around and do your bidding, starting with 1 and going up to 5. Here's how the boss fight against Syrian went with only 2 of the damn things. That's crazy, I barely even had to hit it. The final dungeon was mostly just me walking around like I owned the place as my scorpions massacred anything that aroused their ire.
Robo-Scorpion, attack!
For the final boss, I just spammed out all the scorpions I had on me and, well, yeah. In conclusion, there's a lot to like about this game. It has some enjoyable writing and world building, though with a setting that is admittedly pretty generic, and so heavily inspired by D&D that Larian going on to make the most successful game ever based on that setting feels very natural. When it comes to how enjoyable the gameplay is, I think it's going to depend on what you enjoy in RPGs. While Divinity doesn't perfectly fit the mold of the ARPG, that is where a lot of its inspiration comes from. The emphasis is on hacking and slashing your way through a world full of enemies, with a greater emphasis on dialogue and exploration than are usually seen in that genre. But even then, there aren't many branching dialogue trees, and the player having any choice in how the story goes is very much the exception rather than the rule. If you enjoy the character building side of RPGs with complex stat distributions and synergizing abilities, there isn't a lot of that to be found here either. There aren't a lot of stats, and the ones there are pretty simple and self-explanatory. Meanwhile, unlocking abilities is kinda like a perk system, with a minimum level as the only criteria for unlocking new abilities. This doesn't mean the game's bad though, since to me, the simplicity actually worked. Remember, I played through this game twice back to back, and enjoyed both playthroughs. In the first run, I enjoyed exploring the world and making the suboptimal melee build work until it became a powerhouse in the late game. On the second run, I liked optimizing my route through the game and discovering various overpowered strategies. Overall, I had a great time with the first Divinity, and I'm looking forward to seeing more from this developer in the future. I have a feeling that things will only get better. This has been Rom. If you liked the video, you can hit the like button, and if you'd like to see more in the future, you can subscribe to the channel. See ya.